geeks and geekettes, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, cats and kittens, comic fans from all around the world. Ladies and gentlemen, mushi, bonjour, V-Gates. It's time for another awesome, because of you, information-packed, curiosity-satisfying episode of Ask Chuck Dixon, where you get to ask me questions about what I do for a living. And what I do for a living is I write comic books. We will not waste another second, not one scintilla of your precious time, just like I did there. Let's get to your questions. David Jordan, I saw this interview with you in an issue of Cross-Gen comic Kiss Kiss Bang Bang. What was your insane idea for the Jetsons? And Mr. Jordan graciously sent me a snippet of that interview. And here it is. The question to me there, a question within a question. I think this is the first. Aside from Westerns, what other wild or offbeat ideas do you have that you'd love to develop into a comic but haven't yet? My answer was a gothic romance. I'd also love to do a detailed heist story showing a complex crime from beginning to end from the Hood's point of view. An Asphalt Jungle kind of thing. And I have some insane ideas for how to update the Jetsons. Now, my idea for the Jetsons, the Jetsons was an unapologetic, blue sky, optimistic, 1950s view of what the future would be like. We're in the middle of the space age and computers, and the future looked bright. It looked like economy was booming in the United States, so everybody's feeling pretty good about stuff and thinking, our technology and the new advances in electronics and miniaturization and all these other things were going to bring us to a new age. And the Jetsons represents that. The Jetsons live in a futuristic utopia. They have comfortable lives. All of the work is done by robots. They fly around in machines and really live a life of ease. And we don't see any poverty, no downside to anything. Everybody's going to live fantastic in these high-rise, weird-looking apartments, surrounded by, pastoral landscapes. It's practically looks like what Earth First had planned for us all. So my idea was to update it to the more of the zeitgeist, sci-fi zeitgeist of, the 80s, 90s, and 2000s, which is a darker, more dystopic world. Now, that isn't to say I wasn't going to take the Jetsons to a dark and dismal place and make it unfunny or anything else. It was still going to be pretty much a satirical look at a prospective future. And how I was going to do this is that, outside of the enclave, the bubble in which the Jetsons live, would be a world of all the other sci-fi tropes that had come up since the creation of the Jetsons. It'd be, mutants and killer robots and, all kinds of crazy stuff going on outside of their experience. And the main gag would be that all of the Jetsons, including Rastro and Rosie, would have adapted to this new reality, adapted to these sci-fi tropes, except George. George would just be in denial. He'd be oblivious to what was going on, beyond the horizon of their little futuristic world, and that would have been the grist of most of the humor. And I just think that would be funny. Also to see, Hanna-Barbera style interpretations of, Road Warrior, Blade Runner, Terminator, and things like that. I just thought that would be fun. So, yeah, I wasn't about to tear the Jetsons down. Jetsons is the only Hanna-Barbera property that I've ever held in any kind of regard. And there were hints in the series of perhaps a more dark something dark going on in their universe, something outside of what we could see. Like one example I remember was Elroy ran away at one point, and he was out after dark, and he gets stopped by police, rather, fascistic looking police, who tell him that he's out after curfew. It's like, I remember as a kid thinking, there's a curfew in the world of the Jetsons. There's some, overriding authority over all of them that makes them stay indoors after dark. I mean, what's that about? So I think that's where it began when I was a kid. I began wondering about the Jetsons and what their world was really like beyond their little sitcom adventures. Next question. Ryan Wilson, since you have such an extensive knowledge of movies, what would you consider the movies you would say are your top movies, the best of the best? It's tough to make lists like this, so I'm going by a criteria that I'm picking the best by directors that I particularly admire. So the best by the best directors. It seemed to be where my mind went when I started making the list. Now, there's movies that I really like and I really enjoy. I don't consider them great. They're not great movies. They're not cinematic achievements. They are escapist fun, but they're seamlessly made escapist fun. They are, in their own way, cinema classics because they're made to entertain and they succeed. Films like The Dirty Dozen or The Taking of Pelham 123 or, The Professionals. These are, in their own right, as escapist entertainment, great movies. They're not breaking any new ground, cinema-wise or anything else. They are just excellent examples of the craft. So that's not where I'm going. I'm not including them. And also, there are movies that I would include on the list, except that they're marred by a few flaws. The Searchers, undeniably an American cinema classic, but I don't put it on my shrunken down greatest list because it is marred by a few indulgences by director John Ford. There's some really stupid humor scenes that are meant to be funny that really aren't welcome. They're an interruption of the tone of the story. And while those scenes are entertaining in their own right, they seem like they belong in another movie. My other problem was that, it's John Ford, so it's big action against the sky, shot on location. But one of the important scenes is so obviously shot on a soundstage. And I don't know the reasons for that. It was probably had to do with, the budget or whatever. But it really kind of takes you out of the whole tone, just like the humor scene or the comedy scenes do. So, but other than that, it's an awesome film. It's one of my favorites. But if you see the criteria I'm going for here, I'm looking at perfection. I'm looking at absolute perfection. So here we go. The one that comes to mind over and over and over again is The Seventh Samurai. I watch this movie and it makes me glad that I'm alive. Kurosawa obviously Kurosawa, an awesome director, directed tons of movies in Japan that are considered classics and should be considered classics, are amazing films. But Seven Samurai stands above them all, stands above all movies, in my opinion. It has everything. It has humor, but it's not overindulgent humor. It fits the story. It's there to build the character. And just everything about it, the action sequence at the end, the way the characters are presented, the heart of the film, there's an emotional through line to this movie that lifts it above other action adventure films. It's a keen understanding of human nature, just an absolutely amazing cinema experience. That I can watch over and over and over and over again. And it seems to go by in a blur. I mean, this movie is it 3 hours or over 3 hours? Never feels like it. Never, it's like you just never want it to end. Just beautifully shot and beautifully acted and realized by Akira Kurosawa. Another one, Lawrence of Arabia, another big action against the sky. David Lean. This story is incredible, and again, shot on location. There's no soundstage nonsense. It's all, real cinema, big movie stuff, and in the big movie, there's this little story of T.E. Lawrence and his journey and his passage from being a romantic idealist to a ruthless warrior, and sort of his evolution over the course of this movie. And the dialogue is amazing. The performances, Omar Sharif, Anthony Quinn, Alec Guinness, Arthur Kennedy, just amazing stuff. Just a brilliant movie that I could watch again, over and over again, well over 3 hours long. Never seems that long to me. You just sort of like immerse yourself in this movie. And that to me is that makes a great film. If you lose yourself, and it has a lot on its mind. It never tells you what to think about anything, but it presents a lot of different aspects of human nature. Now, David Lean makes it on this list twice. Bridge on the River Kwai. It's also when I was a kid. And the brilliance of this movie is it presents a great moral quandary. The Alec Guinness character he sort of goes off the reservation. He loses sight. He loses the plot. And that's what the movie's about, is someone that this obsessive personality that sort of forgets why he's where he is and what his purpose is, and begins to think in terms of ego rather than in the terms of others, the welfare of the men under his command. And when I was a kid, I got that. And that's the amazing thing about this movie. I was like 10 years old, and David Lean and his screenwriters made me understand the really complex principles being put forth in this story. That's a master storyteller, to get some dumb little kid to understand these issues. And it's weird because when I saw it with my dad, there was a woman sitting in front of us who did not understand. And she kept asking her husband, why is he doing this? He's working for the Japanese now. Why is he doing that? And as a kid, I'm like, what's wrong with you, lady? What movie are you watching? It's right there on the screen. We can see it, without it being pointed out to you, and again, brilliant performances. Alec Guinness, Jack Hawkins, Sesu Hayakawa, and William Holden. Fantastic movie. And the thing is, this is the only time Lean ever makes my list. I really don't care for any other movie he ever made. I do not like Dr. Zhivago. I do not like Ryan's Daughter. I think they're overblown and the story isn't there. But Lawrence of Arabia, Bridge on the River Kwai, nailed it. Full Metal Jacket. A lot of people, Full Metal Jacket. The biggest thing about Full Metal Jacket I hear, and I got, Stanley Kubrick, again, hard to pick, which is his best movie. This is the one I go back to over and over and over again. I've watched this movie twice a year, and I'm amazed by it each time. And when you say to someone, I like Full Metal Jacket, they'll go, but it's 2 movies. Yeah, it's 2 movies. You know what? Lawrence of Arabia is 2 movies too, buddy. Next time you watch Lawrence of Arabia and you hit the intermission, think about it. You just watched the whole movie. Beginning, middle, and end. And then after the intermission, a new movie starts. Lawrence of Arabia 2. So get off my back. That's what I love about Full Metal Jacket. It just throws out the 3-act structure entirely to tell you the story it wants to tell you. And again, brilliant performances, beautifully photographed. Kubrick somehow manages to make England look like Vietnam because he never wanted to leave England. But again, over and over again, watch it. And yeah, okay, maybe it's 2 movies. It's 2 great movies. and an absolute master. And people say, well, the third act is a little slow. What movie are you watching? What movie? That final small unit action against the sniper, that is so amazingly photographed. Because once again, like David Lean with Bridge on River Kwai, Kubrick shoots that with clarity. It's a very complex scene, but you don't realize how complex because he shoots it with such fluidity and such clarity that you are immersed in the fate of that small unit of Marines against that lone sniper. So amazing movie. And one of the things I really like about it is, I always liked the movie, but then I met over time a number of Marines, U.S. Marines, who were there at that time. They were there for the Tet Offensive and the post-Tet Offensive, which is the period this movie covers. And every single one of those guys said it's the most accurate movie they'd ever seen, reflecting their own experiences in Vietnam. So you got that as well. So now let's go back a little bit. Buster Keaton, the General. But this is an amazing movie. Absolutely amazing movie. Again, all shot on location, all full-scale special effects, bridges collapse, trains crash, everything else. It's a comedy adventure film. It is the model, the template for any comedy adventure film. And stars Buster Keaton as a Confederate soldier out there to impress a girl, and basically gets involved with Union raiders trying to steal a Confederate railroad train and mess up train traffic in the South. And the Keaton stunts are incredible. The set pieces, it has a cast of what appears to be thousands. This is a big budget production. And it's the chases are thrilling, the stunts are thrilling, the funny stuff is funny because Keaton is always funny. He always brings the laughs, and just an amazing cinema achievement and groundbreaking. But it has heart, and you care about the characters as well as laughing along with them. And there's a new 4K restoration coming out that I'm dying to get my hands on and take a look at. I've seen snippets of it, and the restoration is eye-popping. So can't wait to see that. Yeah, Buster Keaton, the General, his greatest silent film in a list of great silent films. Keaton made some amazing features. Sullivan's Travels, Preston Sturges writing and directing. This is that rare movie that has a message and the message is palatable. The movie doesn't tell you what to think about it, but it's basically a message about mankind. It's a message about entertainment. Obviously, this came from Sturges' heart and mind as he thought about, what purpose does filmmaking have? What was the whole point of his job? Why was he given the talents he was given? But lest you think this was a think piece or a message movie, it never feels that way. It feels like a romantic comedy, and then it kind of changes tone. And some great movies can do that. Very rare, but they can do that. And the movie changes tone toward the end to get to where it wants to be. And it has an absolutely unforgettable climactic sequence. One of the greatest things ever put on film, especially in this period. It's right up there with I Was a Fugitive from a Chain Gang, the conclusion to that movie. Also unforgettable. They really were great at this in the golden age of Hollywood, coming up with imagery, just before the end popped up that would stay in your mind for the rest of your life. And Sullivan's Travels is one of those movies. And Preston Sturges is a great, great American screenwriter and director. And if you're not aware of him, you should be. Made the best screwball comedies ever put on film. His Girl Friday. I said, okay, I got to have a Howard Hawks movie on here somewhere. Which one do I pick? And I picked His Girl Friday. This is a movie I watch at least once a year. Brilliant movie. Howard Hawks takes The Front Page, which was a hit Broadway show, a play, and then a hit movie, and he takes it and he gender swaps the characters so that now there's not just a conflict between them and these two newspaper people, but the conflict is that they are a divorced married couple, and Cary Grant is conniving to keep Rosalind Russell on his newspaper, not just because she's a talented reporter, which was the gimmick in Front Page, but also because he wants her back as his wife. Hawks is running on all 8 cylinders. His patented, meticulously rehearsed dialogue scenes that were rehearsed to make them sound as natural as possible, with characters interrupting each other, and this flow of dialogue which informs you of what's going on and advances the plot, even though it seems like nobody ever gets to finish a sentence. And then you've got Cary Grant and Rosalind Russell head to head, and sparks fly. The dialogue is amazing. And the most incredible thing about this is that so much of the dialogue was ad-libbed by Cary Grant. He didn't necessarily follow the script. And Hawks and he were on a 3-picture roll. And this was I believe the first of the 3 pictures that they worked on together, like back to back to back. And Grant would just ad-lib and Rosalind Russell would be a little bit lost. So she hired outside writers to give her rejoinders, so she would be ready for anything that Cary said. And the result is amazing. The result is absolutely amazing. A movie that just goes by so quickly that you're not even aware of the passage of time. And definitely worth your time. And of all of Hawks's movies, and I love all of Hawks's movies, this is probably the one this and Rio Bravo are the ones I go back to over and over and over again. So, but I could list this, have and have not, if only angels have wings. I mean, the list goes on and on. The Big Sleep, Ball of Fire. The guy just had a great filmography, but this one to me, this deserves to be on the list. Hitchcock. How do you pick a great Hitchcock? It's Shadow of a Doubt. Vertigo, Psycho, how do you pick one? But I'm going to say Rear Window. And Rear Window kind of breaks my rule of set-bound movies, because this movie is entirely set-bound. It is entirely set-bound. It is largely all seen. Well, it is entirely seen from the point of view of Jimmy Stewart, who is, he's got a broken leg. He's a newspaper, he's a magazine photographer. He's a freelance photographer. And, he's trapped in his apartment in this sort of, hip to ankle cast that he can't get out of. And, he's trapped in his apartment until the cast can be removed. And, he bides his time spying on his neighbors. He can look out of his apartment into a courtyard, set in New York City. And he sort of spies on his neighbors. And then he sees one that he thinks may have committed murder. And that's the crux of the plot. But it's all a set. The entire courtyard set is designed, meticulously designed, to be shot from a single perspective. And we basically see only what Jimmy Stewart sees and hear only what he hears. And that is an incredible cinema achievement that apparently Stewart was reluctant to even be in, because he had previously with Hitchcock filmed the movie Rope, which also takes place all on one set and all in ostensibly one take. It's like 10 takes, but when you see the movie, it looks continuous. Like it's one continuous shot for the entire film. And apparently it was torture. It's hard to do. Stewart wasn't happy with the end result. The movie didn't become a hit. And Stewart did not, when he heard that Hitchcock wanted to be in yet another movie shot on a single set, he balked, but Hitchcock convinced him. And it's a good thing because Hitchcock knew that we would be able to sympathize with Jimmy Stewart as a peeping Tom. Whereas another actor playing the part, it would have come off creepy. But Jimmy Stewart had so much goodwill with the film-going audience that they wouldn't even think about it. They wouldn't even think, hey, this guy's like a massive voyeur. I mean, why is he doing? Why is he, snooping on these people's lives? Kind of creepy. But you never get that vibe. It's just you get that. God, this guy's so bored he's watching his neighbors. Amazing movie, absolutely amazing movie. Now, John Ford, apologies, John Ford. I got to include a great John Ford movie on the list, and that would be They Were Expendable. This is a story made during the war about PT boats in the Pacific. Stars John Wayne, Robert Montgomery, Ward Bond, Donna Reed. It's an amazing movie. Unlike The Searchers, it has humor elements, like service humor elements, but they fit the tone of the film. They are a part of military life. They are more a natural part of the story instead of an interruption to it. They do not interrupt the tone. But this is I'm not sure where they shot this, but it's all shot on location. There's no set bound scenes. And it is a dour for a movie made during the war. It's a very dour, downbeat film because at this point in the war, the American movie-going audience was tired of the kind of rah-rah, USA, USA, USA kind of war movies they were making. Obviously, the American movie audience is like, okay, we've seen enough propaganda films. We're seeing the result of this war. We know that some of our boys aren't coming home, or they're coming home wounded or broken, or whatever. We know that there's real sacrifice here. And so a lot of Hollywood filmmakers began making movies reflecting more the state of the war at the time when the outcome of the war was still in question. And They Were Expendable is a prime example. Robert Montgomery served in the military and had seen combat just before making this film, and he brings that to it. And of course, John Ford brings out a tremendous performance by John Wayne by antagonizing the hell out of Wayne because Wayne did not enlist, as Robert Montgomery did. And it's just beautiful, especially toward the third act is so beautifully photographed, using, light and dark, shooting that golden hour, in the tropics. And, this movie is just amazing. Absolutely amazing. So John Ford makes the list, my short list. Now, whenever anybody makes a list like this, there's this temptation to put on, some oddball entry to show off their, cinematic chops, their movie geek street creds. And I'm going to do that. But I'm being honest with you. It's a movie called Duelist. It's a Russian film. It's the best revenge film I've ever seen in my life. It's set during the 1800s in Russia, and it features a guy who's going to get revenge on the people who wronged him by becoming the greatest duelist in Mother Russia. And he's going to take them all down legally. In fair fights, quote unquote fair fights. And period detail, performances, a story that keeps you guessing right up until the very end. It's superior entertainment. So that's my one ringer, my one oddball off list movie to throw on here, because every list needs one. You know that. All right. Twin spin. Ryan Wilson is back with, how many comics have you written? We've mentioned before about how one site listed you as the writer who has written the third most comics of any writer, only behind Roy Thomas and Stan Lee. Under pages written, but that site seems to have left out a lot of your independent work and online comics. Do you have an exact number of pages or stories you've written? First of all, I blow Stan Lee out of the water. I'm sorry, Stan. But I actually wrote longer than Stan. Like my writing career, meaning turning out comics every single month without fail, is longer than Stan's. Okay, because Stan wrote for a while. He wrote from the 40s into the early 70s. So that's 25 to 30 years, and then wrote a little bit more here and there. Okay, but his steady flow, my steady flows, I've had a longer career, and even longer than Roy Thomas. I mean, forget it. They don't even come close. Seriously. I'm not third. I am number one. The guy I had to beat was Paul S. Newman, who wrote for Dell Comics. And he wrote for Dell Comics for maybe 25 years. Not a long career, but boy, he wrote. He wrote their TV adaptations and movie adaptations and, whatever. If it wasn't Gaylord Dubois at Dell, it was Paul S. Newman. And I blow Paul S. Newman out of the water by I'm like 10,000 pages past him. I've written well over 40,000 pages, on the way to 50,000, and I have an actual count, pretty current. I think up to last year. Jared Mitchell, my Boswell to my Samuel Johnson. The Reverend Jared Mitchell keeps track of everything I've written and keeps account of pages and stories and issues. So I've written, thousands of comics, and I've written probably above 45,000 pages of comics, heading toward 50,000. Because I keep writing. Unlike Stan and Roy, there's never been a month in 41 years that I haven't turned out at least one comic. And there's many months where I turned out 8 to 10. So nobody's catching up with me, because especially in today's world, where writers simply don't stay on books very long, and writers come and go. I mean, you have writers who were, the hottest thing going 10 years ago, and you never see anything from them now. But me, I don't go away. So maybe if you wanted to take a look at my current count, let me know at Bruno Bookstore at gmail.com. And if you want to drop something on St. Jude's in exchange for that, I'll send you the list of everything I've done. Because Jared's put together a whole chart, detailing story, issue number, page count, all the rest of it. So I got the bona fides. Now, I didn't mean to do it. I wasn't going for the record, because it never seemed like work. I was just having fun, so I just didn't stop writing. So there you go. It's Joshua Ignatowski. Of course it's Joshua Ignatowski. He says, you got any writing tips for generating more ideas for stories when it just seems like everything that comes to mind is derivative? It's just asking yourself that question. Is there a better way to say this? Is there a better way to say this? And, and that includes, is there a better place to take this story? Like, as a writer, you think of a story, and the story seems to roll down tracks ahead of you in your mind. Like, okay, well, my story starts here, and then this happens, and that happens, and that. And after a while, you realize I'm rolling down the same rut as every other writer who's told this kind of story. What can I do different? How can I turn this on its head and give the readers what they want in this genre? Because primarily I write genre. What they want in this genre, without giving it to them in the way that they already anticipate or the way they expect, because it's boring. very boring. So you don't want to bore anybody. And I live in dread of boring readers. So even though the story in your mind is kind of set, okay, it's starting here, starting here on this lonely road, and it's got to end in this bayou during a forest fire. And it's like, okay, well, how am I going to get there? And you never go right there. That's the thing. You never go right to the gold. You find, character complications. You find twists and turns that don't seem contrived. You find obstacles. You find reasons why the hero or villain can't get what they want right now. And, I know this all sounds very mechanical and everything else, but it really isn't. It's looking for, it's keeping the story interesting for yourself as a writer. I would be bored just writing the story the way it first occurred to me. Because in your mind, you've got all these stories. We've all done this. We've all consumed massive amounts of fiction. And you have to be aware that you're not just doing the same thing somebody else did. You're not pulling the same rabbit out of the hat that 100 other writers before you did. And how you avoid that is there another way to say this? Is there another thing that could happen here other than the expected thing? So, it's about the best advice I can give you. I know it's not pithy, but that's it. Twin spin. I don't teach people how to write. I just write. Joshua is back, of course. And he says, it was really unique how in your Nightwing run, Dick has to stop a theft of a bunch of microscopic early stage test tube babies. How'd you come up with such an original crime for him to stop? Well, again, this is what we're talking about. You need your hero to stop crimes because that's what he does. He's a crime fighter. But he's fighting bank robbers or somebody that stole jewelry or somebody that stole, some theme criminal stealing some sort of weird object. It gets dull. It just seems like, okay, this is a placeholder crime. I really didn't put any thought into it. I just need a bunch of bank. I mean, I saw this a lot in the 70s where to get a cold opening, the writers would open Spider-Man stories with Spider-Man busting up a robbery. And it's like, as a reader, I was like, well, there's nothing interesting about this robbery. It's just a robbery. It's just a bunch of guys who, for some reason, are in costumes and they're robbing a bank. How they thought they were going to get away all wearing identical costumes, I don't know. And it all seemed kind of generic. So, I would always look for different crimes. Over the course of Nightwing, as you said, he stopped, somebody stealing embryos. He fought against guys who were robbing trains while in motion. All of these things. I did a story where the Riddler was trying to steal valuable violins, and all of these things I basically gleaned by reading newspapers. Wall Street Journal at the time. Wall Street Journal had a regular column about art theft. So you could read about art theft. What pieces were missing, where they were stolen from, who might have stolen them, how the theft happened, how the FBI was investigating it. But they would have other things. And I'm sure the baby embryo thing came up in an article somewhere that I read. I know the train thing did. I read a number of articles about hoods robbing trains that were in motion. They were like, modern day pirates, like railway pirates. But so, I always wanted to look, so it wasn't a generic bank robbery. There was something else to it, that seemed interesting. And also, maybe the reader could learn something. So, I didn't make that one up. I read about it somewhere, but it was my quest to, how do we say it? How do I say this differently? How do I find a different story here to tell? Triple spin. All right, Joshua, you are up for the third time at bat. Let's swing for the fences. Okay, Joshua says, despite how much more brazenly corrupt Bloodhaven is than Gotham, Nightwing's early stories in Bloodhaven come across as being rather lighthearted in comparison to what Gotham's dealt with during your time at the Bat offices. Do you believe this might be due to the fact that the story is being viewed through the eyes of a lighthearted Dick Grayson as the main character, and that if Bruce was dealing with Bloodhaven's criminal underworld, the stories might have an entirely different tone? Yeah. A lot of it is Nightwing's view of the world. I was on a podcast recently and we were talking about the different Robins, and their outlooks, and Dick Grayson's view of the world versus Jason Todd's versus Tim Drake's. And it occurred to me, I never really thought about this before, but it occurred to me that the reason why Dick Grayson reacted differently to the death of his parents than Bruce Wayne did was that Dick Grayson and his parents were in a dangerous profession. And perhaps Dick Grayson, even as a boy, realized he might lose his parents at any time to a natural accident from their high wire act. I mean, it was definitely, they were in a dangerous, life-threatening situation. Now, he didn't anticipate they would be murdered, but he certainly, in his mind, realized that either he could die or his parents could die under the big top sometime. There were lots of opportunities. They were risking death every time they got up in the traps under the big top. And I thought, well, maybe that affected his outlook. He was able to compartmentalize or deal with the loss of his parents better than Bruce Wayne. Bruce Wayne led a pampered life. His parents' death came as a total shock to him, a glimpse of a world that he didn't even realize existed until that moment. It's this dark awakening that Dick Grayson didn't experience. And maybe that was the cause of it. But maybe either consciously or subconsciously, I intuited that, and Nightwing's approach to things was a little bit more optimistic than Bruce Wayne's could ever be. Quadruple spin. Joshua's back with, you've talked about how reading declassified World War II files from the governments of the USA and Japan inspired the story for your Storming Paradise Limited series. Were there any other times you recall reading declassified files inspired a story that you wrote? Well, not classified files, but I've had an opportunity to see things that maybe I shouldn't have seen, or hear things that maybe I shouldn't have heard. I worked for a couple of years at the Federal Reserve Bank in Philadelphia. The Federal Reserve Bank is what it sounds like, Federal Reserve. It's a federal building. It's huge. There are a number of them across the country. They have gold reserves. They have cash reserves. And they are guarded by federal agents who are potentially very heavily armed. These buildings are fortresses. I was lucky enough to make it through FBI clearance to work there. I managed part of the janitorial crew. The janitorial crew was broken up by floors because this was like a 6-story building. And I had the top floors. I managed the crew on the top floors. And so I was there every night and I saw everything. We had access to every part of the building. And I got to talking to guards and heard all kinds of wild and crazy stories about stuff that had gone on at the Federal Reserve, stuff that the public didn't know about, stuff that if you look it up on the internet, you won't find anything out about it. Plus, they had lots of publications. They had whole publications about securing banks because the FBI oversees banks robberies and oversees bank security. So I got to read all this, like the inside information about investigations about robberies and things like that. These are like internal publications about bank security. I mean, so, I sucked all that up. But, and then, lots of times I would just hear about stuff that, most people don't get to hear about. I worked for Microsoft for a while doing a weekly comic that was about internet security, about guarding the databases from hacking, from viruses, from rootkits. And I got to talk to the head of Microsoft Security, and he told me some stuff about third world scamming mills, computer mills, Nigerian princes, and the rest that blew my mind. I mean, stuff you're never going to read about anywhere. About the goings on, the cooperation between Microsoft, our FBI, and foreign governments. Something that should have made the news a lot recently in this area that didn't was, did you know that Thailand, their Air Force bombed scamming centers and casinos in Cambodia? They had airstrikes on computer scamming centers that were bilking people out of millions and millions of dollars. And they were bombing the casinos as well because apparently casinos owned these scamming outfits. And they gave fair warning. They said, hey, we're going to come bomb. We're going to level these places. Get out. The Chinese operators of these scamming outfits and casinos would not allow their employees to leave and made them, you're going to stay for the bombing. I guess getting rid of potential witnesses. But this happened. This happened in the last few weeks. And I don't think it made the news anywhere, but it happened. But those are the kind of stories this guy from Microsoft was telling me. Stuff that you don't hear about on the news. Now, I've talked to lots of veterans over the years. World War II, Vietnam, Korea. I heard about secret missions from Korea, from a guy who was on the mission to pull French troops out of Vietnam. This is a chapter in history you never hear about. The French were defeated in Vietnam by the Viet Minh and had to get the hell out of there, had to evac. And our American Navy sent boats down there to pick them up. And I talked to a guy. We were security guards together at a department store, and he told me that he piloted a landing craft that picked up French Foreign Legion troops from a dock in Haiphong Harbor. And you never hear that story. And lots of other stories. I mean, I've had a relative, my father-in-law, summarily executed an SS officer in Italy in 1944. And I've heard other stories from guys who served in Europe about summarily executing SS members. And you don't read about that. You don't hear about that. And then lots of stories from Vietnam. Probably the most amazing stories I heard in Vietnam weren't from a soldier. They were from a Boeing employee. And this Boeing employee was tasked with going to Vietnam and going into the jungle with special forces teams to retrieve telemetrics and important gear from crashed American jets in remote parts of the Vietnamese jungle. And if you read my Rambo First Kill graphic novel, you'll know that a lot of the story is about a temporary fire base being formed to retrieve gear from a downed fighter. And then something very, very special that's on that jet that they don't want falling into the hands of the enemy. And that's kind of the crux of the main story in that book. But this guy told me all about his harrowing adventures, very, very dangerous adventures as a Boeing employee, as a civilian employee of Boeing aircraft. And, again, not going to read about that in the history books. Another one, talking to cops and talking to reporters in Philadelphia. I heard stories from reporters of the Philadelphia Bulletin. My sisters worked at a bar that was called the Jailhouse. And it was a cop bar, not big surprise. It was a cop bar, and it was across the street from the Philadelphia Bulletin. So it was cops and reporters. And you heard a lot of stories that what you read in the newspaper was all lies. It's like you read about, cops that died as a hero in a firefight, turned out actually be a suicide. Things like that. Boy, this picture's not appropriate for that, is it? But so you got to hear the news behind the news, which leaves me with the impression, and I want to leave you with the same impression, that a lot of what you see in the media is for show. There's things and there's things they know. And, there's things that our ruling class and our media and military know. And they should be the ones to know that. I mean, we don't need to know all this stuff. We don't need to know what rough men are doing in the dark to preserve our freedoms. We don't need to know all that. Because a lot of people can't put it into context. They can't, they conflate these things. But, trust me, there's a lot of stuff you don't know. And I learned it just by flying on the wall, asking questions. I must have an honest face. People must realize, hey, he's not going to run and blab all about this. And I didn't. I told you the high points. I didn't give you any details. I just gave you the concepts. I didn't give you any, and I wouldn't, because it's not fair to the people who told me these things in confidence. But boy, oh boy, if we ever meet in person, I'll scare the hell out of you. Okay. Quintuple spin, Joshua. You're almost there. Okay. Joshua says, what's been a really challenging part of writing death traps in your comics and novels? Writing death traps, the hardest thing is getting the characters out of them in a way that's not contrived. I love death traps. I love a good trap. But you gotta make it scary. You gotta make it suspenseful. And then you gotta make it so that you're not real sure how the person's going to get out of it. And then they gotta get out of it in a way that isn't contrived or makes sense or is stupid. No deus ex machinas in a trap. The hero has to get out by his own means, either intellect or brute force or whatever. So that to me is the challenge of a good trap. And that's why they're hard to write. I don't write a lot of them. Because, the really good ideas come few and far between. And, but, they're a regular feature in a lot of comic book stories is the trap. And it's a great suspense element. Let's face it. Now growing up, I think my dedication to doing a trap that makes sense, I think it comes from my disappointment over many traps I saw when I was a kid. There's this Batman, over and over again, Batman would be put in these 2-way, 3-way traps where he can be drowned, set on fire, machine gunned to death, electrocuted, and it was like all these different threats. And the way that he always got out of them was just so contrived, like, oh, you didn't notice this, or I knew this special combination, or the dumbest one of all, some character who said he had the ultimate trap that Batman could never escape, and he was so enthralled with his own telling of how masterful his plan was that he forgot to put Batman in the trap. Hand to God, that was the resolution to the story. Batman escaped the trap by never being put in it. And I think this made, in my childhood mind, I made a vow to myself that I was going to present traps, particularly for Batman. Let's leave that out, Superman out of it for now. Particularly for Batman, that were better than the things that disappointed me as a kid. Batman 700, we have a trap that Graham brought up because we knew we wanted a trap. We wanted everything but the kitchen sink in issue 700 of Detective Comics. And one of the things we really dearly wanted was Batman and Robin in a trap. And so we, Graham had listened to a Lone Ranger radio show in which Lone Ranger was trapped in a sealed well with the water rising. And I thought, well, okay, that's a good start. And so basically we took that, we stole that idea, but played with it more because the radio show just dealt with rising water. But I realized, you would not only be dealing with rising water, you would also be dealing with increased air pressure at the top of the well. As the water reached the top, the air is being compressed. And what happens then? And you would have to, Robin loses consciousness. Batman has to not only figure their way out, but keep Robin's head above water and all the rest, and fight losing consciousness himself as the pressure just builds up to a painful degree. And we were real happy with that. Of course, I was delirious with how Graham depicted it because Graham is, not only the artwork was not only kinetic, but it was clear what was going on, and he got the drama of the situation pitch perfect, and we were both real happy with that. And then I came up with this trap for Batman in an arc where Batman is chained to a buoy in Gotham Harbor in shark-infested waters, and Batman is injured. He's suffering from blood loss. He's chained to this buoy. He's either going to die of blood loss or a shark's going to get him, and he has to use his ingenuity, wits, and just pure gutsiness to escape from this trap. And again, Graham did an awesome job portraying it, and we were real happy with the end result on this one. We were just, spraining our rotator cuffs, slapping ourselves on the back. So proud of this one. And then, of course, probably my most famous trap was the Green Arrow trap, which I designed under the editorial direction that Oliver Queen be put in a trap that Superman could not get him out of. The only solution to release Ollie from the trap was for Superman to use his heat vision to amputate Ollie's arm. Ollie had his arm trapped in a dead man explosive device, a nuclear weapon or what, I forget what it was. It was big. It's a big bomb. And it was going to go off in an airburst over Metropolis. And that was the thing. And then Ollie would lose an arm. And we would go forward in the continuity with that. And then Paul Levitt said, just kill him. So I came up with this really intense trap, which does appear in the story, but the resolution is different. So there you go. Yeah, traps, they're tough. They're tough to do right. I mean, you just do one and just sort of crap it out. And just have, the hero's mom show up at the right moment to let him out. But, who needs that? So anyway, I have to apologize. Joshua, you do not make it to the sextuple spin. You sent 6 questions, but the last one didn't make the cut. I'm really sorry. But you're going to try again. I know you are. Or I may just go back through previous questions that I didn't use and cobble together 6 questions for you because you're such a major part of the show. Thank you so much. Okay, McCran Comics. In your most recent episode, number 275, I was surprised to hear you concede that superheroes are fascist. You explain it as a product of the genre being a childhood wish fulfillment power fantasy. While I agree that this immaturity is a factually accurate observation of how these stories are typically written to and received by readers in actual practice, especially with the popularity of this notion and reactions to it becoming prevalent in the 1980s. I must take exception to the idea that this is inherent in the idea of superheroes altogether, in light of this reasoning being the through line to the fascism argument. Now, Mr. McCran goes on for quite a long time, and it would take me probably 15 to 20 minutes to read all of his very thoughtful, very articulate, and well thought out response to my remarks in the last episode, many of which I agree with. I agree with almost everything that he said. So I'm going to address a lot of that in the context of my answer here. But I'm not one of those guys, one of those comic book pundits or British writers who has total contempt for the superhero genre and says, that superheroes are fascist, intrinsically fascist. they're not meant to be intrinsically fascist. That's the thing. There's intent and there's the results. Growing up, we had two kinds of heroes, or actually probably three kinds of heroes when I was a kid. We had agents of chaos, like Bugs Bunny and Daffy Duck, and particularly Woody Woodpecker. And we thought they were great as anti-authoritarian, because children have an anti-authoritarian streak. Okay. It comes out more in some than in others, but all kids have it, where you just every once in a while want to say no, or you want to just run off. Take off your shoes and climb a tree. So there's that. So we had that kind of hero. And then we had the ruthless authoritarian lawbringers, and, in Westerns and cop dramas and all the rest. And we thought these guys were cool too, because they were just badass. They were going to bring the law down and everybody had to follow the rules. I mean, total authoritarian, totally the opposite of Bugs Bunny. And we dug them too. And then we had just agents of destruction. And then we'd go to the movies over and over again to see just utter pandemonium happening caused by, some monster. So as kids, we were able to hold those concepts in our head. This is what we looked at for entertainment. Now, as far as the superheroes being fascist, Mr. McCran makes a point later on that he feels that superhero stories are morality plays, and that, and that's how they should be seen. That's, you might be right. And this is my main disagreement with you. You might be right that they are morality plays. But what isn't a morality play? I mean, good fiction presents a moral quandary of some kind, of some degree. But my thing is that kids don't see it as a morality play. The moral compass only has 2 points when you're a kid. You're either good or you're bad. There's no gray area. You decide who's good and who's bad. And that's what superheroes do. So while you may intend your superhero story to be a morality play, it is going to be about power. It's going to be a wish fulfillment about power. I want to be Superman. I want to be Batman. I want to run as fast as the Flash. I wish I had a magic ring. And so all of the morality is embodied by a single omnipotent figure who decides the fate of everyone in the story. I mean, Superman can save the kids in the school bus plummeting off the bridge or stop the bank robbery. He's got to decide each of those times. It's up to him. He has the power of God to save one or punish the other. And he has to make those decisions all the time. And you may say that's a morality play, but as a kid, it's a power thing. I have the power to do that. I am imbued, I am embodied with these abilities. And even Batman, because Batman just never gets it wrong. Batman, he's smart, he's tough, he's all of those things. And he's calling the shots. He's calling the shots in Gotham. I mean, when Gotham has a problem, their police force can only go so far, and they turn to one guy. And Batman can decide or not decide. He has that power. He is a fascistic figure because kids are drawn to order. They are drawn to the stark black and white. They are drawn to, there's no gray area. There's no nuance. They just want things the way they want them. They want everybody to get along, even if their heads have to be knocked together. They don't want their parents to fight. They don't want their siblings to fight. They want to pick up every stray dog and cat in the neighborhood and bring them home. I mean, and why can't it be that way? And why can't we make it so that all of those things can happen and everybody's happy all the time and everything else? These are fascistic concepts. They're childish. It's like fascism itself is childish. And again, I'm not one of these, hipster writers thinking this way. Now you look at something like Dirty Harry. Dirty Harry is adult wish fulfillment, adult power wish fulfillment. But it's not fascistic because Dirty Harry isn't all powerful and omnipotent. He can only enforce the law that's in front of him, and he can flaunt the rules and go outside the rules and throw the book away and all the rest of it. And we love him for that, because he's a populist hero, not a fascist hero. But he falls in line with a concept you mentioned in your essay, rugged individualism. He is the rugged individual. Superman's not a rugged individual. He's an individual, but there ain't nothing rugged for him. I mean, he's got pretty cozy life, got pretty easy life. If he didn't decide that he wanted to go around saving humanity, he'd have one awesome day after another, just doing whatever the hell he wanted to do, showing off for the girls at the beach, hanging around the Fortress of Solitude, visiting Kandor, whatever, but he's forced by his impulses for good given to him by being raised in America's heartland by a God-fearing couple, his adopted parents. So he's given this background, but he's still, in a child's mind, a fascist character. And I'm not saying anything good about fascism. And I'm hearing things good about fascism. I'm hearing people on the right, and they once they say these things, they lose their conservative card. We're talking about like almost a monarchy or a benevolent dictatorship. And he said, there's no such thing as a benevolent dictatorship because it's not permanent. I mean, you may have Marcus Aurelius, and everything's going great, but next guy might be Nero. So there's no such thing as a benevolent dictator. That's stupid. It's childish. And if you are a card-carrying conservative and have those ideas, you need to move on down the line, buddy, because to the extreme right is, as you said, Mr. McCran, rugged individualism. It is the individual, unencumbered by government, unencumbered by a ruling class, free to do what he wants. That's what's all the way on the right. It's leave me to hell alone is all the way on the right. So yeah, I mean, I'm hearing this, but fascism is for children and superheroes are for children. I hate to break it to you. Okay. I'm a comic fan. I write comics. I love comics. I still read superhero comics, particularly older superhero comics, and I still enjoy them for what they are. But I still watch Pixar movies, but they are not intended for me. They are for children. And I hate to break it to everybody. And you love these characters. I love these characters, and you want to continue reading them as an adult, and there is nothing wrong with that. But you can't grow those characters up with you. And you can't ignore the idea that they are wish fulfillment characters created for children, and thereby fascistic in nature. Innocent in the hands of a child, not so in the hands of an adult. So there you go. BrunoBookstore@gmail.com. BrunoBookstore@gmail.com if you wish to send me a question or suggestion or whatever. And as I said, if you want to drop something on St. Jude's, I'll send you my most recent bibliography that proves beyond the shadow of a doubt that I am the most prolific American comic book writer of all time. And I didn't even work at it. It was easy for me because I'm a mutant. Oh, that's it for this week. Thank you for listening. Thank you for watching. Mr. McCran, I'm sorry I couldn't present your entire essay. It was very wonderful. I really enjoyed it, but I hope I addressed all of your issues and let the listeners and watchers know in context, the ideas you had presented. Very well thought out. Thank you so much. Thank you to all of you for the incredible questions. And Joshua, better luck next time. See you down the road.